ladies and gentlemen, friends, and fellow citizens. Today, I must begin with a stark warning. History is not just a record of the past, it is a mirror of our present and a forecast of our future. Too often, civilizations believe they are immune to the lessons of history, but time and again, the same mistakes reappear in new clothing. Today, as I stand before you, I cannot help but sound the alarms. History is about to repeat itself, uh, and the consequences are terrifying. History does not whisper, it shouts, it sends warning after warning, but only to those willing to listen. When we speak about history repeating itself, it is not some poetic abstraction. It is a reality carved into the rise and fall of every civilization before us. The tragedy, however, is that human beings, particularly those in positions of power, often dismiss these lessons as irrelevant to their own time. That was then. They say, this is now. Yet the echoes of the past are all around us, and ignoring them does not erase the danger, it magnifies it. Consider the great Roman Empire, once the most powerful force on earth. It stretched across continents, commanded enormous armies, and shaped the known world. But Rome was not destroyed in a single dramatic blow. It rotted from within. Its elites became disconnected from the struggles of ordinary citizens. Its political system fractured into bitter rivalries. Its resources were drained by endless wars on foreign soil. Does this sound familiar? When we look at the United States today, we see a nation burdened by inequality, polarized politics, and ceaseless foreign entanglements. The lesson of Rome should not comfort us, it should terrify us. The same blindness played out on the eve of World War I. Leaders of Europe, intoxicated by power and misled by pride, stumbled into a war they thought would be short and decisive. Instead, it unleashed industrialized slaughter on a scale never before witnessed. Millions perished in trenches that stretched across Europe, and entire nations were left devastated. What makes that tragedy even more haunting is that it was avoidable. Historians have long shown how diplomatic missteps, arrogance, and failure to imagine the true costs led to disaster. Today, as tensions rise between nuclear powers, can we honestly say we are not repeating that same hubris? Even in more recent memory, we find lessons unheeded. The wars in Iraq and Afghanistan were justified to the public as necessary interventions for security and democracy. Yet, what did they bring? Thousands of American lives lost, trillions of dollars wasted, and societies in the Middle East left fractured, destabilized, and more vulnerable to extremism than before. History had already warned us of the dangers of overreach, of the futility of trying to impose power abroad without understanding local realities. But the warnings were drowned out by ideology and ambition. Once again, history spoke loudly and leaders chose not to listen. Here is the hook that should keep every citizen awake at night. History is not repeating itself in the distant future. It is already unfolding in real time. The cracks are visible. The same arrogance, the same divisions, the same addiction to power that once toppled empires and fueled global wars are at work in our world today. And yet, the narrative we hear from many in positions of authority is one of denial. It cannot happen here. They insist, but history's harshest lesson is that it always happens where people think they are most immune. What makes this even more alarming is the speed of modern crisis. Rome collapsed over centuries. World War I erupted after decades of simmering rivalries. But today, in an interconnected world, events escalate with breathtaking speed. A financial crisis in one corner of the globe can ripple worldwide within hours. A military miscalculation between rival powers could spiral into a nuclear confrontation in days. The stakes are higher, the timeline shorter, and the margin for error vanishingly thin. The repetition of history is not inevitable, but it becomes inevitable when we refuse to recognize it. That is why this warning must not be ignored. The same cycles that destroyed the mighty in the past are circling us once more. The question is not whether history is knocking, it is whether we will answer before the door slams shut. America today stands at a perilous crossroads, one that history has warned us about time and time again. A nation that once prided itself on being a beacon of opportunity and democracy is increasingly plagued by internal fractures that resemble the decline of great powers before it. The widening gulf between rich and poor is no longer just an economic statistic. It is a fault line that threatens the stability of society itself. When ordinary citizens lose faith that the system works for them, when they see wealth and influence concentrated in the hands of a few, resentment grows, and with it, the seeds of unrest are planted. History teaches us that no empire, however mighty, can survive for long when inequality corrodes its foundation. Yet here we are living through a moment where America risks repeating that same mistake. The polarization that grips the political system is another warning sign flashing red. In the past, societies that thrived were those that found ways to compromise, to balance competing interests for the greater good. But when politics descends into a battlefield where enemies are demonized and consensus becomes impossible, governance collapses into paralysis. This is not an abstract danger. It is happening right now. The inability of Congress to pass meaningful legislation, the growing distrust between states and the federal government, and the refusal of leaders to put aside partisanship for the sake of national unity echo the dysfunction that has unraveled powerful nations before. Every time history has shown us that division, when left unchecked, does not merely weaken nations, it destroys them. Foreign entanglements further compound the problem. The United States, like empires before it, has stretched itself across the globe, committing resources, money, and lives to wars and military operations that too often fail to bring the promised stability. The echoes of Rome's overextension resound here. Empire that once boasted of unmatched military might collapsed under the weight of its foreign adventures while neglecting the very people at home who gave it strength. America today spends trillions of dollars overseas while its infrastructure crumbles, its healthcare system strains, and its educational institutions falter. History has already shown us what happens when nations prioritize dominance abroad at the expense of prosperity at home. The warning is clear. No nation can long sustain global supremacy while its domestic core is eroding. Here lies the uncomfortable truth that acts as a hook we cannot ignore. America's challenges are not born of inevitability, they are choices. Leaders choose to prioritize wars instead of schools, to serve lobbyists instead of citizens, to deepen divisions instead of healing them. These choices echo the arrogance of past empires that believed themselves too exceptional to fall. But history has no patience for denial. Every empire that thought itself invincible eventually discovered that the laws of decline apply universally. America is not exempt. The most striking aspect of this moment is the speed with which these pressures are converging. Inequality is no longer a slow burn, it is accelerating. Political polarization is no longer confined to heated debates. It has seeped into families, communities, and even institutions meant to unite. Foreign commitments are no longer limited to a few hotspots. They now span continents, entangling America in conflicts both seen and unseen. And yet, amidst this storm, the voices warning of danger are often dismissed as alarmist. But isn't that precisely what history shows us? That the voices of caution are ignored until it is too late. America stands today with two futures ahead. One path repeats the mistakes of history, a nation distracted by foreign ambition, weakened by inequality, and torn apart by division. The other path requires a reckoning with these failures and the courage to act differently. The crossroads is here, the warning is clear, and the choice cannot be delayed. History is watching, and it will not forgive complacency. The climate crisis is no longer a distant concern for future generations. It is the defining emergency of our time. What makes it so dangerous is not simply the scientific data, though the evidence is overwhelming, but the way in which societies continue to behave as if the clock is not ticking. Rising global temperatures, unprecedented wildfires, catastrophic floods, and stronger hurricanes are not isolated events. They are the unmistakable signs of a planet under strain. History has shown us countless examples of civilizations that collapsed when they failed to manage their environment, when they exhausted their soil, overused their water, or ignored the ecological limits that sustained them. Today, humanity faces a crisis on a far larger scale, yet the response remains timid and fragmented. The lesson from the past could not be clearer. When societies ignore the warning signs of environmental collapse, the cost is civilization itself. What makes this moment particularly alarming is the speed and intensity of change. Ancient civilizations that fell to ecological mismanagement, such as the Mayans or Mesopotamians, saw their crisis unfold over centuries. We, however, are experiencing transformations within decades. The Arctic ice sheets are melting faster than predicted. Sea levels are rising with accelerating momentum, and extreme weather events are becoming the new normal. Each disaster comes with a heavy toll in lives, infrastructure, and economic stability. Yet leaders continue to argue, delay, or downplay the urgency of the moment. The hook that should grab every citizen's attention is this: the climate is not negotiating with us. It does not wait for election cycles, political debates, or corporate profits. It responds only to the laws of science, and those laws are delivering a terrifying verdict. The economic cost of inaction is staggering. Every year, billions of dollars are lost to climate-related damages, from destroyed homes to ruined crops. Insurance companies are retreating from vulnerable areas, leaving citizens to bear the burden alone. Supply chains are disrupted by floods, droughts, and wildfires, threatening both global trade and local livelihoods. And yet, despite knowing this, governments and corporations pour billions into fossil fuels, locking in a trajectory that will only make the crisis worse. History teaches us that great powers fall not only because of external threats, but because they fail to adapt. The refusal to pivot toward renewable energy, sustainable agriculture, and resilient infrastructure is not just short-sighted, it is suicidal. Another layer of danger lies in the geopolitical instability that climate change is already creating. Droughts drive migration, scarcity of water fuels conflict, rising seas threaten to displace millions, creating humanitarian crises that will spill across borders. Nations that cannot adapt quickly enough will see internal unrest, while wealthier countries will face waves of displaced populations seeking refuge. History has shown us how resource competition has sparked wars in the past. Today, the climate crisis is amplifying those same pressures on a global scale. The hook we must confront is chilling. This is not merely an environmental issue, it is a political and security crisis that threatens global order. Perhaps the most sobering element is the denial. Just as leaders before World War I dismissed the possibility of a catastrophe until it was too late, today's leaders downplay the severity of the climate emergency, choosing incremental steps when bold transformations are required. Citizens are told there is still plenty of time, as if the accelerating data does not prove otherwise. The danger of complacency is exactly what history warns against. We cannot pretend that incremental reforms will stave off collapse when the very foundations of our environment are unraveling before our eyes. The terrifying truth is this: we already know the solutions. Renewable energy is cheaper than ever before. Sustainable farming practices are available. Technologies exist to reduce emissions dramatically. Yet the gap between what is possible and what is being done is vast. The only question is whether societies have the political will to bridge that gap before it is too late. The warning signs are flashing, the costs are mounting, and history's lessons are screaming for our attention. The climate crisis is not waiting for us to decide. It is already here, demanding a response. The only choice left is whether we meet this moment with courage or let it become the mistake that history will record as humanity's final act of denial. The world today is standing on the edge of a dangerous precipice as tensions between global powers intensify with every passing month. The rivalry between the United States, China, and Russia is no longer confined to trade disputes or diplomatic maneuvering. It is escalating into a contest for global dominance that carries the risk of catastrophic miscalculation. History has warned us about moments like this. Before World War I, Europe was divided into competing alliances. each convinced of its strength and security. Leaders believed they could control the spiraling tensions, but arrogance and misjudgment turned a regional crisis into a world war. The hook that should chill us is this: once again, the world's great powers are playing a dangerous game, uh, and this time the weapons at their disposal are infinitely more destructive. The United States insists on maintaining its status as the global hegemon, projecting military power across every continent. China, rising rapidly in economic and technological strength, seeks its place as a central player on the global stage. Russia, though economically smaller, leverages its military capability and energy resources to assert influence in Eastern Europe, the Middle East, and beyond. Each power views the other not simply as a competitor, but increasingly as a threat. This is the precise formula that history shows leads to escalation. When mistrust deepens, when communication breaks down, and when leaders assume they must act first to avoid vulnerability, conflict becomes not just possible, but inevitable. What makes the present moment uniquely alarming is the scale and immediacy of modern weaponry. Unlike the armies that clashed in the trenches of World War I or the tanks that rolled across Europe in World War II, today's conflicts risk being fought with nuclear arsenals and cyber weapons capable of paralyzing entire nations. A single miscalculation, a single false alarm could unleash destruction on a level humanity has never endured. During the Cold War, we came close more than once. Misread radar signals, political brinkmanship, and human error nearly triggered nuclear catastrophe. It was only through luck, restraint, and last minute interventions that disaster was avoided. The hook that should grip our attention is sobering in today's heightened environment of mistrust. How many times can we rely on luck to save us? The competition is not limited to weapons alone. It extends into the global economy, where tariffs, sanctions, and trade wars create ripple effects that destabilize markets and deepen resentment. It extends into technology, where rival powers race for supremacy in artificial intelligence, 5G networks, and quantum computing. And it extends into ideology, where each side frames itself as the defender of a better world order. The US champions liberal democracy. China promotes a model of state-led development, and Russia seeks to undermine Western unity by exploiting divisions. Each of these narratives further polarizes the international landscape, hardening attitudes and closing the door to compromise. This rising tension is not confined to boardrooms or diplomatic summits. It is spilling into every corner of the globe. Proxy conflicts emerge in Africa, the Middle East, and Asia, where rival powers back opposing sides. Small nations find themselves pressured to choose a camp, fueling instability and resentment. The same dynamic defined much of the 20th century, where Cold War rivalries turned local disputes into global crises. History shows us that when great powers compete for dominance, smaller nations often pay the highest price in blood and chaos. That pattern is once again taking shape before our eyes. The danger, however, is not simply in the possibility of open war. It is in the normalization of hostility. Each year that passes with increased military exercises expanded alliances, and heated rhetoric makes cooperation harder to imagine. The language of diplomacy is being replaced by the language of confrontation. What was once unthinkable, a direct clash between nuclear armed states, is now discussed openly as a possibility. The hook we must confront is urgent when leaders begin to speak casually about the prospect of war. The world has already entered the danger zone. History is filled with moments where leaders believed they could control events, only to discover too late that events controlled them. Today's rising global tensions are not an abstraction. They are the repetition of a pattern that has led to disaster before. The question is whether we will recognize the danger in time or march forward blindly, repeating history's darkest chapters with consequences more terrifying than the world has ever known. Technology has always been a double-edged sword. It has the power to transform societies, raise living standards, and expand human potential, yet it also carries the capacity to destabilize, disrupt, and destroy. The dilemma we face today is not whether technology will shape our future. It already is, but whether humanity has the wisdom and foresight to guide its use responsibly. Just as the Industrial Revolution unleashed both extraordinary progress and wrenching inequality, today's digital revolution is opening new opportunities while simultaneously deepening social divides and threatening the very foundations of democracy. The hook we must not ignore is simple. The tools we are building today may soon outpace our ability to control them. Artificial intelligence stands at the forefront of this dilemma. It promises breakthroughs in medicine, science, and productivity, but it also threatens millions of jobs from manufacturing to white-collar professions, creating waves of unemployment and dislocation. When workers are displaced without a safety net, history shows us what follows: unrest, populism, and political extremism. The rise of industrial automation in the 19th century fueled strikes, protests, and in some cases, violent uprisings. We are now on the edge of repeating that pattern, only on a far larger scale. The terrifying prospect is not just economic dislocation, but the erosion of dignity for millions who feel abandoned by a system that values efficiency over human livelihood. Surveillance technology is another warning sign flashing brightly. With every advancement in facial recognition, data tracking, and digital monitoring, states and corporations gain unprecedented power to watch, predict, and influence human behavior. History teaches us that unchecked surveillance corrodes freedom. From authoritarian regimes that spied on their citizens to oppressive governments that weaponized information against dissenters, the record is clear. When power has the ability to monitor without limits, it eventually abuses it. Today, the combination of mass data collection and artificial intelligence has created tools of control more sophisticated than any secret police could have imagined. The hook that should chill us is this: what once required armies of informants can now be done by a single algorithm. The weaponization of technology extends far beyond surveillance. Cyber warfare is now a daily reality. State actors and criminal networks can paralyze infrastructure, disrupt elections, and steal sensitive information at a scale previously unimaginable. Unlike traditional warfare, these attacks are often invisible until it is too late, and they carry the potential to bring entire nations to their knees without a single shot being fired. The Cold War showed us how arms races escalate tensions and create fragile balances of terror. We are now witnessing a new kind of arms race in cyberspace and artificial intelligence, but this time with far fewer rules and safeguards. The danger lies not just in deliberate attacks, but in accidents, miscalculations, or technologies spiraling beyond their creator's intent. Even the promise of connectivity, once hailed as a tool for democratization, has revealed its darker side. Social media platforms designed to connect communities have become engines of division, amplifying falsehoods, polarizing societies, and eroding trust in institutions. When misinformation spreads faster than truth, democracy itself is weakened. History has warned us about the dangers of propaganda, how regimes used media to manipulate populations and consolidate power. Today, that danger is magnified a thousandfold in the digital arena, where lies can reach millions in seconds and truth struggles to keep pace. The hook here is unsettling. Societies may collapse not because of what is real, but because of what people are led to believe is real. The speed of technological change is what makes this moment uniquely perilous. Previous revolutions unfolded over decades, allowing societies some time to adapt. Today's transformations are happening within years, even months. Governments move slowly, but technology accelerates rapidly, creating a widening gap between innovation and regulation. Into that gap falls chaos, economic dislocation, political instability, and social upheaval. Without ethical guardrails, without frameworks that prioritize humanity over profit or power, we risk building a future that mirrors the darkest chapters of history, where progress for the few comes at the expense of suffering for the many. The technology dilemma is not a theoretical concern. It is happening right now, reshaping our lives, our politics, and our security in real time. The lesson from history is unmistakable. When societies unleash powerful forces without wisdom, accountability, or restraint, the results are catastrophic. The hook that must grab our attention is urgent and undeniable. Technology will either be our greatest ally or our most terrifying adversary. And the decision rests not with the machines, but with us. The warnings are clear. The evidence is overwhelming, and the lessons of history are staring us in the face. Yet the most dangerous response is the one we see so often today: denial. Societies rarely collapse because they lacked knowledge. They collapse because they lacked the courage to act on that knowledge. Leaders dismissed the warning signs. Citizens convinced themselves there was still time, and generations paid the price. That is the cycle we are repeating now. The urgent call to action cannot be delayed, because history does not wait for us to become comfortable. It advances relentlessly, punishing arrogance and rewarding foresight. The hook we must confront is sharp and undeniable. The future is not some distant reality. It is being written by the choices we make or fail to make right now. When we look around, we see every warning light flashing. Inequality grows deeper, leaving millions disillusioned and angry. Political systems fracture under the weight of polarization and corruption. The climate crisis accelerates, threatening the very ecosystems that sustain life. Global powers rattle sabers, edging closer to confrontation. Technology races ahead without ethical guardrails, disrupting economies and democracies alike. Each of these dangers would be serious on its own. Together, they form a convergence of crises unlike anything humanity has ever faced. Yet the response from many leaders is to delay, to argue, or to pretend that small steps will suffice. History tells us otherwise. Delay is not neutrality, it is complicity in decline. There is a profound irony here. Humanity possesses more knowledge, wealth, and technological capacity than any civilization before us. We can map the human genome, harness renewable energy, and connect people across the globe instantly. The solutions to many of our greatest challenges are already within our grasp. And yet, despite this extraordinary capacity, we stumble toward the same mistakes that destroyed those who came before us. The failure is not in our ability to solve problems, it is in our willingness to act decisively, collectively, and with moral clarity. That failure is the true danger. History shows us that transformative change often comes in moments of crisis, when societies are forced to choose between collapse and renewal. The American Revolution, the abolition of slavery, the civil rights movement, all were born of urgent struggles that demanded courage. Today, we face another such moment, only this time the stakes are global. The hook we must internalize is this: the choices made in the coming years will not shape one nation's destiny, but the fate of humanity itself. The margin for error is vanishing and the luxury of complacency is gone. But here is where hope intersects with urgency. Just as history warns us of collapse, it also reminds us of resilience. Societies that recognize the danger in time and summon the will to act can avoid disaster and even emerge stronger. The key is acknowledging the scale of the challenge and refusing to accept half measures. A transition to renewable energy is possible, but only if pursued with ambition. Reducing inequality is achievable, but only if leaders put people before profits. Peace among great powers can be maintained, but only if diplomacy replaces hubris. The path forward exists, but it requires choices that defy inertia, courage that defies fear, and vision that defies short-term thinking. The urgency of this call to action cannot be overstated. Every year lost to hesitation is another year closer to irreversibility. Every moment spent debating the reality of crises instead of addressing them is a moment squandered. The lesson from history is stark. Those who wait for certainty before acting always act too late. The hook that must stay with us is sobering. The greatest danger is not the crises themselves, but our refusal to confront them until the damage is beyond repair. The future is not predetermined. It will not simply happen to us. It will be the direct result of our choices. We can allow history to repeat itself, leading us down a path of decline, conflict, and collapse. Or we can break the cycle, learning from the past, seizing the present, and building a future defined by wisdom and courage. The choice is in our hands, um, but only if we act now, because history does not forgive hesitation.